This followed allegations that he paid a young person £35,000 for sexually explicit images. The parents of the alleged victim say that he was vulnerable as a youngster and that they are still suffering. The alleged young person involved denied the story, speaking through top London lawyers. No one knows who was paying for those lawyers, but I doubt it came from their pocket money. Following this massive news anchor's resignation from the corporation on medical grounds, staff at the Beeb are now worried that the results of an internal investigation into Huw Edwards will never be published. Well, that's convenient, isn't it? Employees are concerned that withholding the findings would mean that lessons can't be learnt and a similar situation could arise in the future with another star. Katie Razzle, the BBC's widely respected media editor, said she thinks that the broadcaster would now consider the whole situation with Edwards parked. That's right, she says it's been parked. She told the Times newspaper, "My sense is that now he is no longer an employee, the review falls away and the matter is closed. It means some form of closure for the BBC, which can now proceed with its replacement plans." I'm sorry. The review doesn't fall away, the matter is not closed, and the situation is not parked. It's on a double yellow line. Because whether Edwards is guilty or not guilty of these allegations, none of which he has denied, he was effectively a public sector employee. His vast £439,000 salary paid for by an obligatory tax that old ladies are threatened with jail for not paying. Now, the BBC do have a duty of care to Huw Edwards and his mental health. It has been reported that he's been suffering badly and having treatment. And in his recovery, we wish him well. But the BBC also have a duty of care to payers of the licence fee, a duty of care to their staff, and a duty of care to transparency and the truth. At the moment, the organisation is behaving like the mafia or the Roman Catholic Church, a lofty, out-of-touch institution circling the wagons, looking out for its reputation and protecting its own. Until what happened comes to light and lessons are learned, then this story is not going away, and it taints an organisation which should be acting with the highest probity. The wrongdoing committed by evil paedophiles Jimmy Savile and Rolf Harris at the BBC have been fully exposed, a painful but necessary process for the organisation so that those crimes can never be repeated. Now, of course, the allegations against Huw Edwards are not even in the same ballpark, and there was no criminality whatsoever. But if the behaviour of a BBC newsreader has upset colleagues, if it's been unprofessional or inappropriate, if that behaviour has hurt a vulnerable youngster, then that shouldn't be glossed over. It should be a major headline, not the "and finally." Meanwhile, radical climate change activist and BBC Nature presenter Chris Packham, a man who said that it may now be time to break the law to tackle climate change — he still works for the BBC, of course he does — appeared on the Laura Kuenssberg show on the Beeb on Sunday morning, criticising the Daily Sceptic, a well-researched and produced online newspaper which questions and debates the narrative around net zero, COVID, free speech and much besides. Well, the website was described by Packham as the Daily Sceptic, which he alleged has been put together by a bunch of professionals with close affiliations to the fossil fuel industry. The BBC has since shared the clip on Twitter, where it has been viewed more than 850,000 times. Kuenssberg also reposted the clip to her personal Twitter feed. Now, Toby Young, the founder of the Daily Sceptic and the media establishment's arch nemesis, has said that Packham's claims are both false and defamatory. Tellingly, the show in question has now been removed from the iPlayer, but with no correction and no apology. This is because our national broadcaster, which I largely admire and consider an important, valuable national asset, is behaving with impunity, conducting affairs in any way it sees fit, whatever the cost to others. Those remarks about the newspaper, the Daily Sceptic, were unchallenged by the presenter and were damaging to Toby Young and damaging to the Daily Sceptic itself, which, in my view, has been on the right side of history in its short existence, particularly regarding the utterly failed and highly damaging COVID lockdowns. The BBC increasingly lives in an unaccountable world of its own, for which you and I are paying a princely sum every year. The BBC is a bubble, and it needs a prick. Some would say it has too many already. I want the BBC to survive and thrive, but its behaviour of late is a real turn-off. Your reaction, gbnews.com/your say. I'll get to your opinions in just a moment. But first up, tonight's top pundits. I am delighted to have, in no particular order, actor and comedian, British national treasure, the one and only Christopher Biggins, broadcaster and TV personality Precious Muir, and former government minister and broadcaster Claire Pearsall. Lovely to see all three of you with me.
It's a minister, sweetheart.
Well, listen, let me start with you because you called me sweetheart and I'm easily bought, Claire. The BBC cannot brush the Huw Edwards scandal under the carpet.
No, it can't. You're absolutely spot on. When you're funded by the taxpayer, it goes the same as people in the House of Commons, MPs and ministers. You should be accountable to those who pay you. And the BBC has a duty of care, as you said, to the staff, to transparency and to the general public who fund it. You can't just say that it's parked, it's closed, when none of us have really known what the outcome is, whether we ever will know what the outcome is. And the poor person, the vulnerable individual who was basically abused, I think, at the hands of somebody, being such a young age, how is that going to be stopped from happening again? So unless we know that, I think the BBC is acting really badly.
Indeed. Precious Muir, your reaction to this story, do you think it will go away?
No, I don't think so. I mean, you know how I feel about these kind of topics, and I like to hold people accountable.
Yeah.
I think that the problem is that he's allowed himself to be so vulnerable, because if he had been honest with himself, his wife, his family, nobody could blackmail him to do anything in regards to him getting pictures from somebody that he shouldn't be doing. If he was honest
and of course, we have to stress these remain allegations.
Allegations.
But not allegations that Mr. Edwards has denied.
Right, and we don't know. So we do need to have an investigation. And I don't think the police should have stopped the investigation. They should have continued on to find out the truth.
However, Christopher Biggins, the poor guy has lost his job. Nothing has been proven or not proven. So do you think Huw Edwards has been given a rough ride?
No, I don't think he has at all. I mean, I think he deserves whatever outcome is coming along for him. I mean, it's so interesting that this boy, the young boy in question, suddenly has one of the top lawyers at his command to look into the situation.
Let me just stress that we don't know the gender of the young person involved. You're entitled to speculate, but I understand that we're still unaware of the gender. But carry on.
You know, and it just means that
the lawyer's fees. Yeah, that's a lot of pocket money, isn't it?
A lot of pocket money, as you said earlier. But I mean, you know, it's a joke, really, because this boy and his family obviously couldn't have afforded this
or girl,
young person,
boy or girl,
this young individual.
This young individual.
Maybe gender neutral. Probably they, them, Biggins.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
I mean, you know.
Go on, finish your point.
Yes.
No, I mean, they must feel they couldn't possibly have paid this money. So where's this money come from? You know, and that's another question, because we all think we know where it's come from, and I'm sure we're all right, but we can't say anything at the moment.
And what about the reputation of the BBC? I mean, are we being too hard on them? You've worked for the BBC many times, so I've got no doubt you admire the BBC fundamentally.
Oh, I've done some wonderful things for the BBC, and I think their work is fantastic. Porridge, Claudius, Poldark,
unbelievable,
lots and lots of things. But
classic telly.
I do think the people that run it are doing themselves an injustice, because they should be looking into these things and actually making sure that the people who pay their fees get a right outcome of this, and they're not doing that at the moment.
Perhaps another factor that we need to consider, Claire Pearsall, is that Huw Edwards has had mental health issues. We understand he's been treated for mental health issues. Of course, we all wish him well and a speedy recovery. That's a serious matter. And the BBC, therefore, you could argue their hands are tied in regards answer this. A, because of the contract that he's under, their duty of care to him regarding his mental health. They would argue probably there's not much more they can do legally.
But morally, they do. They have the right to go about an investigation. They have a right to ensure the safety of anybody who works at the BBC, whether they be permanent staff, whether they be visitors, people on shows. They have that duty. So I think that, yes, whilst we all wish Huw Edwards well, I mean, it's an awful thing to suffer from a mental health condition. But
it's convenient, though, isn't it, in this particular time?
I think it's quite unfair to say it's convenient. We don't know the ins and outs of this, and I think we have to be really, really careful on it, because you don't want to stop other people coming forward. You don't want to stop other people admitting that they have mental health problems too.
The timing of his mental health is very, very...
Maybe.
But do you not think after the tragedy of Caroline Flack that we need to be very concerned about celebrities and their mental health?
I think that we need to hold people accountable. We need to make sure that we bring this awareness that somebody of 62 years old should not be communicating in any way with a young person in that way. And once we put a line there and stop these kinds of things happening, people will then stop. Because somebody communicating with a young individual, asking for explicit pictures, allegedly, this is not good behaviour for anybody, and especially on a platform like the BBC.
And the face of BBC News. Biggins, are you suggesting or implying that Huw Edwards or his people have played the mental health card?
It would appear to me, yes. And I think that's quite convenient. I mean, they've made so many mistakes over the years. I mean, you know, with Jimmy Savile, which was absolutely outrageous.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, it should never have happened. And, of course, the problem was...
And you knew Savile?
I knew Savile, sadly.
And probably had your suspicions?
Oh, very much. Everybody knew about what was going on, and he was quite a ghastly figure, you know. If I think about it, I can bring back the smell of nylon from his jumpsuits and BO. It was just disgusting. And cigar smoke. But, you know, he had 3 huge shows with the BBC. They weren't going to throw that away.
Yeah.
And that is what is really suspect.
Only a couple of seconds. Biggins, do you think that the BBC should apologise to Toby Young over the remarks about the Daily Sceptic from Chris Packham?
I think they should. I think they should.
Yeah, they absolutely should. You can't take a programme down with zero explanation. They need to stand up and be counted.
Yeah.
OK, well, listen, my pundits, as I think you'll have noticed tonight, are definitely standing up and being counted. They're back in just a few minutes' time. But next up, in the big story, a new nightmare for Rishi Sunak as top Tory MP and former Minister Dr Daniel Porter defects to Labour. I'll get reaction from Britain's most experienced and respected journalist. The Sun's Trevor Kavanagh is next.
Nana are queer. Weekends from 3 p.m.
J.K. Rowling has accused politicians of snuggling up to trans campaigners. The Harry Potter author has called for an investigation into why political parties are embracing the language of pro-trans groups. So is it time to ditch campaign groups such as those? Well, welcome again to my clashers, former Labour Party advisor Matthew Laza, also businessman and activist Adam Brooks.
I think the Cass report is really welcome. I think there's been a huge amount of agreement, including from some trans rights campaigners, that there's an awful lot of good in the Cass report. I think that I'm more concerned about mermaids, which is currently under a Charity Commission investigation, and some of the reports, if they're to be believed, like sending out chest binders, are more alarming. I think on Stonewall, which has done such great work over the past 30 years on LGBT rights.
It said 2-year-olds could be trans. Now, that is one of the most horrifying things I read today. Actually, J.K. Rowling tweeted that out there. To say that a 2-year-old can think that they can be another gender when my 4-year-old still thinks she's Elsa on some days. You know, there's no common sense, and to me it's
very badly phrased.
It's very sinister that these people actually believe that these kids want to change gender, and unfortunately out there are parents that almost see a trans kid as a fashion accessory now, and I think this whole agenda has pushed on people that this is normal to change gender, and we have to push back. And as I said earlier, To be trans is not normal.
Well, I don't agree with that
extreme.
phrasing. I think it's
extreme.
a big step, Adam, but there are clearly people throughout history who have been
But it's
trans.
not normal behaviour, is it?
I think as far as children are concerned, children need to be given the space to explore the world, and that can include experimenting with, breaking previous gender stereotypes. That doesn't mean that people should be sort of labelled at the age of 2, which I completely disagree with.
I'm Christopher Hope.
And I'm Gloria Di Piero, bringing you
PMQ's live here on GB News.
Whenever Parliament is in session on a Wednesday at midday, we'll bring you live coverage of Prime Minister's questions. We'll be asking our viewers and listeners to submit the questions that they would like to put to the Prime Minister, and we'll put that to our panel of top politicians in our Westminster studio.
That's PMQ's live here on GB News, Britain's election channel.
I think the most exciting bit for me is talking to people.
People who I think are ignored often by the major news channels. We're going to give news they want to hear. There's a voice there that needs to be heard. I think there's a chance here for a diversity of opinion to be expressed, which you don't find elsewhere. It's really exciting.
We don't hold back. We're free to say how decisions that are taken here
affect us all around the country. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Now, the BBC think that they can sweep the Huw Edwards scandal under the carpet. Not on my watch. I just won't have it. That was the topic of my big opinion. Well, it's very busy on your messages. That's gbnews.com/your say. The BBC are doomed, says Manchester Girl. Shirley says, good evening, Mark. Mental health does not tell you to exploit young people. Biggins, Precious Muir, all of your guests are right in what they're saying about the BBC. And these emails go on. Pretty powerful stuff. Absolutely with you, Biggins, says Wendy. My thoughts exactly. We'll come to that, of course, later in the show with the papers. And let me tell you that in about 35 minutes' time, I'll be dealing with Andrew Neil, former GB News star, who has been attacking the channel this week. My full response in my take at 10. You won't want to miss it. But it's time now for the big story. And if you're just joining us, bombshell news from the world of politics and another almighty headache for the Prime Minister, Rishi Sunak, as the Conservative MP and former Minister Dr Dan Poulter, the MP for Central Suffolk and North Ipswich, has defected to Labour amid his concerns about the state of the NHS under the Tories. Writing in tomorrow's Observer newspaper, Dr Poulter said the decision had been prompted by the life-changing experience of working as a part-time mental health doctor during the junior doctors' strike. He said, my NHS colleagues are unable to deliver the right care in a system that simply no longer works for our patients, which is why I'll now focus on my work as a doctor and support Keir Starmer and the Labour Party both before and after the election on NHS policy. And in a final damning line, he said, with the NHS desperately struggling to deliver the care our patients deserve, I have come to the conclusion that the only cure is a Labour government. Well, let's get reaction now from one of the most experienced and respected political journalists in the country, the Sun newspaper's Trevor Kavanagh. Trevor, privileged to have you on the show. This is an MP who is not seeking re-election at the next election and has admitted to previously voting Labour. Plus, he's going back to his old job of being a full-time doctor. Is this really the story it's being cracked up to be?
Well, it's certainly a big story, and it certainly can't be ignored. This is a despicable and orchestrated act of blatant treachery by a serving Tory Member of Parliament to his leader and to his own party. I mean, he cites as his reasons for the fact, in his view, that the Tories have become the party of the nationalist right. Well, excuse me, but the reason that Rishi Sunak is in so much trouble is that many Tory voters don't think that he's either Tory or nationalistic enough. And to suggest that his reason for going to the Labour Party is because they've got the solution to the Labour Party, to the National Health Service's problems, I mean, this is the National Health Service is the Labour Party's creature, and there is no indication or evidence whatsoever that they do have any solutions to this problem. And finally, he says that he has no animus towards Rishi Sunak, saying this literally as he has timed this to perfection to coincide with the coming local elections. And oddly enough, I'm not sure that this is a headache for Rishi Sunak, because the outburst of unadulterated rage among grassroots Tories suggests this might rebound in favour of the Prime Minister.
Well, I think that may be the case. We're going to call up a clip of this former Conservative MP speaking to Gloria De Piero here on GB News. Trevor, this is a Tory backbencher who formerly supported New Labour, and here he is telling this channel as much. Take a listen.
Have you always voted for the Conservative Party?
No, I voted under Tony Blair. I voted Labour. I've always thought of myself as a middle-of-the-road centrist.
Hiding in plain sight, Trevor. Does this demonstrate just how left-wing a portion of the Conservative Parliamentary Party has become?
Well, certainly this particular section has become centrist, but I think that he has, basically nobody knows Dan Poulter. They may know the name, they may know he's a doctor, but he doesn't turn up anywhere for the sort of parliamentary proceedings for which he was elected to perform. He's a mysterious figure who spends more of his time pursuing his other role as a National Health Service doctor, which may be perfectly honourable if he isn't trying to be a politician representing his constituents at the same time. I just think that this man's a fraud. He's been a fraud, I think, right the way through his position as a Tory MP, and he's now returning to his normal, natural right home in the Labour Party.
Now, of course, as you'll understand, Trevor, he's not here to defend himself. He would argue that he follows his principles. He did that when he backed the Tories, and he now does that as he backs Labour. But you're entitled to your view. Trevor, you'd imagine, wouldn't you, that the three key issues at the next election will be the economy, immigration and the NHS. Does this defection make the NHS a weak spot now for Rishi Sunak?
No, I don't think so. I mean, look, if he had continued with his original plan, which was to simply not stand again at the next election, I think that could be regarded as a principled political decision. To defect to the Labour Party, which has no role or justification for its election manifesto, has no manifesto whatsoever. Even its most senior advisors and supporters are at a loss to understand what Keir Starmer stands for, and have warned him specifically and to his face that he needs to actually spell it out so that people know what they're voting for at the next election and will then stand by him after the election if things become difficult. Sure, Dan Poulter has shifted to the Labour Party without knowing any of those answers. He doesn't know what they've got in store for the Labour Party, for the National Health Service. And I suspect all he's after is a peerage, which I think will be forthcoming in reward for his embarrassment to the Conservative Party.
Trevor, what are your latest thoughts on the Rwanda plan? Will we see flights before the next election? And could that move the dial for Rishi Sunak?
I think a lot depends on who is on the plane. My own view is that the only way that the flights to Rwanda will work is if the people arriving on the beach are scooped up and put into a detention centre near the airport, vetted for their claims, and then those that fail supervision or initial examination are put on the first plane out, so that people the other side of the channel understand that this is the risk they will take as well. I think otherwise, if they're simply going to skim off the top of those who've been sitting in the asylum queue for months or years already, I don't think people on the other side of the channel are going to take any notice at all.
Trevor, two quick ones before you go. Opinion on this changes almost daily, but do you have a view as to when Rishi Sunak will go to the country?
Yes, I think he will go long, not short. I think he's under pressure from some to cut and run. I think that he's relying very much on his economic record, which is what he's stood by and stood for ever since he was elected Prime Minister by the party. And I think that he will go into October or even November.
And Trevor, political predictions are a dangerous game to play, but is a Labour landslide nailed on, or is there a chink of light for Rishi Sunak somewhere along the way?
Well, I think, frankly, Mark, that there's a chink of light. Not that he's likely to win, but I think that the landslide is by far from certain. And this is not my own personal view. It's the view of very senior Blairite members of the Labour Party. They have seen this before in 1964 when Harold Wilson appeared to be nailed on for a landslide, a very charismatic new prime minister talking about the white heat of technology, up against a toff in the shape of Alec Douglas-Home. And in the end, he won by 4 seats. And this is what they fear, that because Starmer has refused to spell out exactly what his party will do in office, people might shy away at the last minute and wonder what on earth they are gambling on.
The legendary Trevor Kavanagh, a privilege to have you on the show, Trevor, and look forward to catching up soon. Do have a look at Trevor's brilliant column in the Sun newspaper, always a must-read. Coming up next, shocking scenes in Wales yesterday as Sir Jacob Rees-Mogg is pursued by an angry mob at Cardiff University. What is wrong with Britain's universities? Is it just a matter of time now before someone gets seriously hurt for having opposing views? We'll debate that next.
Hello, here's your latest weather update from the Met Office for GB News. We hold on to rather unsettled weather across the UK over the next few days, but temperatures will gradually start to climb too. We've got low pressure sitting towards the south of the UK at the moment. That's starting to push weather fronts up from the south, and certainly as we go through this evening into the overnight period, we'll see outbreaks of rain working their way in from the south across many southern and eastern parts of England, some of that rain turning quite heavy, particularly as we go into the early hours of Sunday, and that rain also reaching the southeast of Wales by the early hours too. Towards the north and northwest is a clearer picture, a few showers around here, and turning quite chilly with those clear spells. You can see a touch of frost in places by Sunday morning, temperatures locally below freezing, but holding up the cloud and the rain towards the south and east. That takes us into a pretty wet day across many eastern and southeastern parts of England tomorrow. Some heavy bursts of rain still to come. Notice things brightening up perhaps for a time across the southeast of England, giving some heavy showers, but generally a pretty wet picture, quite windy too, and that rain pushing up into eastern parts of Scotland into the afternoon as well. Whereas out towards the west, it's a brighter picture, sunshine and showers, but pretty chilly wherever you are, temperatures no better than 12 or 13 degrees. As for Monday, we'll see an east-west split once again, but a reversal of fortunes this time, with the east and south-east seeing the brightest skies. Out towards the west, quite a few showers to come. Those showers merging in places to give some longer spells of rain. And as we head into the coming week, we hold on to a pretty unsettled picture. Outbreaks of rain for most areas at times, but notice those temperatures picking up too into the high teens or low 20s.
GB News is Britain's election channel. And from Thursday the 2nd of May,
the people decide.
As the country heads to the polls in a rush of elections.
We'll take you through the night as the first results come in.
And we'll pick up at breakfast
with the very best guests and analysis.
And on the weekend, the results won't stop, and neither will we.
We'll explore what it all means for you as we look ahead to the general election.
Continuing coverage live from Thursday the 2nd of May at midnight on GB News.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, every Sunday at 9:30 when I'll be interviewing the key players in British politics and taking them to task.
This report basically says that he's not fit to stand trial.
With an upcoming election looming over Westminster, now is the time for clear, honest answers.
I agree.
And that's precisely what I'll get.
Is he indecisive? Incompetent?
That's the Camilla Tominey Show at 9:30 every Sunday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's election channel.
2024, a battleground year.
The year the nation decides.
As the parties gear up their campaigns for the next general election.
Who will be left standing when the British people make one of the biggest decisions of their lives?
Who will rise?
And who will fall?
Let's find out together.
For every moment, the highs, the lows, the twists and turns.
We'll be with you for every step of this journey.
In 2024, GB News is Britain's election channel.
Well, Adrian's message, gbnews.com/yoursay, speaks for many of my viewers and listeners. He says, I would never vote Labour, and after 37 years of voting Tory, I wouldn't vote for them either. Daniel Poulter, how as a doctor can he do two full-time roles? No wonder the NHS is in a state if this is what they're having to put up with. Well, I think he worked part-time in the NHS, but I do agree that I think being an MP should be a full-time job. Josh is calling Daniel Poulter Dr. Daniel Traitor. He was mandated by his constituents because he's a Conservative, probably because of Boris Johnson. I bet South Suffolk and North Ipswich are furious. He will receive his P45 before too long. Meghan says the NHS is run by Labour in Wales and Socialist NSP in Scotland. Both have longer waiting lists than England. OK, and how about this last but not least? Meghan, who is a GB News member, says Sunak will hold a general election second week in November. There you go, you heard it here first. I'll be dealing with Andrew Neil in my Take at 10. That's just over 20 minutes' time. He's attacked GB News. I'll be dealing with him in no uncertain terms. Lots of that to get through. But let me tell you now about a shocking story that happened yesterday. The Conservative MP for North East Somerset and GB News star Sir Jacob Rees-Mogg was pursued by a crowd of protesters at Cardiff University following an address to their Conservative Party association. Take a look at this. Shocking scenes. Sir Jacob was chased to his car by pro-Palestine protesters. He was filmed being harassed by a mob of what have been described as hard-left demonstrators, one of whom was waving the Palestinian flag, as Rees-Mogg was rushed by security into a waiting car. So what do these shocking scenes tell us about the climate of political debate in Britain's universities? To discuss this, I'm delighted to welcome senior university lecturer in philosophy and free speech campaigner, Dr. Edward Skidelsky. Dr. Skidelsky, good to have you back on the show. What is your reaction to that footage that we've just seen?
Well, as you say, it's really bad. Of course, students have a democratic right to demonstrate, but what we saw there went well beyond legal demonstration. It looked to me, from what I could see, quite possibly like criminal harassment. I mean, in the moment just after the clip ended, you actually see one student throw himself onto the bonnet of the car, while another student drapes the Palestinian flag over the windscreen, which, as the car tries to get away, which could very possibly be dangerous. So yeah, this is clearly intended to intimidate. And it does have a very chilling effect, as people say, and that's its point. It's aimed to make it very difficult for student societies to invite controversial speakers like Jacob Rees-Mogg, especially if, as often is the case, they have to bear the cost of security themselves.
And of course, you can agree with Jacob Rees-Mogg or disagree with him, but he's not really a controversial figure, is he? He is a member of Parliament and part of the governing party of this country. Look, you can't tar all of the students with the same brush, but is this kind of a story and this video that we've seen, is it indicative of the culture of universities at the moment?
Yeah, they've become increasingly, well, I should say, a small number of students. It's not the majority, it's a small minority, but they're an extremely vocal and influential minority. They have become extremely intolerant, particularly of people on the right. And they say that having people like this speak on their campuses harms their mental health, it threatens their safety. They use this kind of rhetoric, which is completely absurd. And they sort of actually make it very difficult for student societies to invite a lot of people.
It's deeply troubling, isn't it? Edward, let me bring my pundits in as well. Do stay with us. I'm delighted to have Precious Muir, Christopher Biggins and Claire Pearsall. Precious Muir, you might expect this to happen in central London, central Manchester, Glasgow, but you wouldn't expect to see this at a university.
Well, actually, it's happening around the world. At the moment, in Columbia University in New York, it's recently happening. And then it follows after that, various other campuses like Boston, Ohio. I mean, I think it's just happening pretty much across the board. So it's like universities are taking on the pro-Palestine situation, and it's kind of causing mayhem. I don't really know where they plan to go with it, but it seems to be becoming out of control.
You have to wonder, Claire Pearsall, why young people would bother getting themselves into debt in order to attend such a place where opposing views are not welcome.
But I think this is what we need to deal with in universities and actually in society as a whole, is to understand free speech, to understand other people's opinion and to be able to debate it. Now, there is nothing wrong with holding an opinion on either side, as long as you are willing to listen to another side of that argument. And I think the universities should be there to expand people's minds, to learn a lot more about the world. And yeah, we've all had idealistic thoughts when we were younger. I'm sure that we could all say that things that we believed when we were teenagers are not what we believe now, and that's just part of growing up. And universities are there to expand that level of knowledge. So I don't think we need to shy away from it. I actually think it needs to be challenged. And I think that Jacob Rees-Mogg was quite right when he said they're entitled to their opinion. This has been done properly. They can say these things. And he walked away. Now, intimidation is not right in any way, shape or form, but freedom to debate is what we should be proud of in this country.
Biggins, make it make sense. Why are universities having to learn about free thought, free speech and free debates?
I think they feel that they're hard done by. And I think that's down to a financial part of this whole scheme. I mean, for instance, I don't know whether they get grants or whether they don't, or whether they're short on money because everything is so expensive now. And certainly, at the end of the day, they want to prove something in doing this. They end up with a very big debt. When I was a student, I got everything paid for. I didn't have a debt when I left university, or I didn't get into my drama school. It was halcyon days. Now, I think there's a lot of pressure on students to find the money, and I think that's where they're grumbling about.
Oh, my God, Biggins, you would make the dream university roommate, I've got to say. Hours of fun. Listen, Edward, before you go, you are the founder of Academics for Academic Freedom. Free speech, no ifs, no buts, so people can just search.
No, sorry. Committee for
Academic Freedom. Let me get it right. Have I miscredited you? How can people find out about your group?
It's Committee for Academic Freedom. Academics for Academic Freedom is another free speech group, which we work very closely with, but we're distinct.
Committee for Academic Freedom. Your closing thoughts on this matter. Have we reached the point of no return, or can sanity return to the campus, Edward?
I think it will return come August when the new Freedom of Speech Act comes into full force. It will make this sort of thing much more difficult because members of a university will actually be able to take their institutions to court if they can show that their free speech has been violated. And also it makes it very clear that the burden of security lies with the university and not with the individual student society. So they will have to pay for security. So people like this won't be able to use this as a threat anymore.
My thanks to Dr. Edward Skidelsky, who is a lecturer at Top University, but also he is part of the Committee for Academic Freedom. More power to you, Edward. We'll catch up soon. Lots more to come. I'll be dealing with Andrew Neil in 15 minutes' time in my Take It 10. He has attacked GB News. My response is coming. But next up...
GB News Breakfast. Every day from 6 a.m.
We're now going to talk about Meghan and Harry. There was a polo match they took part in Miami, and we've got Angela Levin, royal correspondent here. So, what have you picked up from this this polo match?
Well, the interesting thing is that the polo thing that's going to be photographed and filmed for Netflix, this is Harry's one.
Yes.
But there was Meghan centre stage, and she stood there holding the treasurer.
Yes.
And actually, who she pushed around was a doctor, Dr. Sophie Chankuka, who's chair of Santabile, the charity that they're doing it for. And she was asked if she would take the trophy. And she said, yes, that's why she came, because the money from the polo matches going to this
Yes.
charity.
Huh.
And Meghan had to push her out of the way because she wanted to be in the middle. I've never heard such a disgusting, rude thing to do.
That at the end of the day, she's an actress. She knows how to take centre stage.
Yes, but this was bullying. You know,
Actual physical pushed her.
No, she didn't actually physically push her, but she wanted to go next to Harry because it was her charity. And so she bent down under the trophy and then went the other side of Meghan, and then she's all smiling. I mean, that turns my stomach, actually.
Yeah.
I mean, anybody would know that that's not appropriate. Let Harry have a little thing of his own. He scored the goal that made them win, and you'd think she would be really pleased. He pecked his lips, he pecked her lips. It wasn't actually a great passionate kiss, as the paper said, because it didn't last more than a second. You know, she's crushed him to nothing.
In the GB newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens.
With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK,
GB News brings you accurate reporting of the day's topical agenda.
When the news breaks, wherever and whenever it's happening,
We'll be there.
This is GB News.
the People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon, Britain.
Good afternoon, Britain.
Weekdays from midday, we bring you the most compelling stories from across the United Kingdom.
And why it matters to you. From your doorstep to our inbox.
That's right, we want to hear from you. Good afternoon, Britain. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Every Saturday, 10 till 12, we'll bring you all of the news that you need to know. We'll also remind you there is so much to smile about.
It's my favourite time of the week. I get to relax, enjoy some light-hearted stories, and let Ellie teach me about fashion too.
That's Saturday Morning Live, every Saturday, 10 till 12.
Only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Andrew Neil in my take at 10, but it's time now for Mark Meets, and this evening, comedy writing legend Richard Sparks, a man who has penned gags for some of the biggest stars in the country, including Mel Smith, Rowan Atkinson and Griff Rhys-Jones. He was one of the brains behind comedy satire show Not the 9 O'Clock News. Here's a quick reminder.
SDP T-shirts. Their shop is now selling Liberal SDP Alliance trousers.
Iran, and there was brisk bidding at an auction in Tehran today when an almost complete box of black magic went under the hammer.
Polo now. There was uproar during a game at Windsor today when Prince Charles dismounted to change sides.
Oh, remember when comedy was funny? Richard has since turned his skills to writing books with his debut fantasy novel, New Rock, New Role, out now. Richard Sparks, welcome to Mark Dolan tonight. We'll get to the book very shortly. But for those who don't know, tell us about Not the 9 O'Clock News. What kind of show was it, and why did it have such a big impact?
Well, all credit goes to John Lloyd, the producer, who put the whole thing together. I remember in the very early days going to sit in his office. It was very exciting. One of us had an office at the BBC. We were all student conductors at various universities. And I said, well, what's the show going to be? He said, well, we're going to build it around Rowan. I haven't decided on who else is going to be in it. And we're going to do weekly satire. I remember saying, look, really, going back to TW, why don't you go on from what Python did? And he looked at me as if I was mad. He said, we're not nearly as good as them. And he was quite right. You know, Python zigged, Not the 9 O'Clock News zagged. I was one of many writers on it. I missed the second series because I was sent off to New Zealand to write a film series, which paid for a house in London, well, plus mortgage, you know. So that was a better wage than John was offering, and but they're fun times, and they're a very, very talented group.
Do you think Not the 9 O'Clock News should return, because it was a classic show?
Well, I got interviewed about this the other day, and I said it would be great. I think it was the front page of the Star.
Okay.
We'll pretend it's the Times Literary Supplement, okay? But yeah, and there are satirical programs around, and there are so many good writers these days. I mean, if you look at Andrew Iannucci's career, and some of the writers on Not the 9 O'Clock News, like, Andy Hamilton, Jenkins,
Punt and Dennis.
Well, I mean, you know, some really talented people.
Most definitely. Richard, what do you make, though, of political correctness in comedy, or so-called woke culture? Is that a problem?
Yes and no. I mean, I'm not in favour of any kind of censorship. Politicians are, I mean, excuse me, comedians are the lords of the misrule, aren't they? Their job is to make people laugh and to poke fun and to deflate the pomposity of kings and princes and of dictators. And I think we should respect boundaries. I mean, if you do it well, you can be very, very, very insightful. And if you do it badly, you're just offensive and not very funny.
Too right. Well, too right, Richard. Tell me about the book. Very exciting. New Rock, New Roll. It's your debut. Tell me about the book and why you wrote it.
Well, it's the first of 4 in a series I've now written. They're coming out 1 a year. And it grew out of my love for role-playing games. I played a lot of games online. And one day I thought, well, what would it really be like to be in a world like that, being a heroic young avatar battle mage that I made for myself? It's not someone going into a game. It's someone being zapped off into a strange new fantasy world, where, of course, he's completely hopeless. You'd be, they may have won the world championship pushing a keyboard around, the 3 of them. But when he's standing in a hillside with a crappy sword and a shield and being chased by wolves, it just gets worse. And he doesn't know where his 2 companions are, one of whom's an Australian orc and the other is an Asian American sword dancer girl. And the 3 of them are great behind a screen, but in real life, they're hopeless. So, and then he eventually meets up with at least one of them, and they get recruited into an army where they learn to get good. And then the quest unfolds that has the fate of the realm at stake, as usual. And that by the end of the book, it's all explained. He's got to survive if he's going to find out what happened and why. And we're set up for the rest of the series.
I think you're the new J.K. Rowling, New Rock, New Roll. I've been sent a copy by your team. I can't wait to read it. I think in these dark times, we could do with some fantasy and a bit of escapism. Richard, you're in the States now. I understand that you are the owner, or have been the owner, of a very popular sports bar in Las Vegas. Is that right?
Yes. You don't always make a huge living out of writing. So one of my best investments is I now own 2 sports bars in Las Vegas. And the first one is having its 10th anniversary this weekend. Next weekend, I'll be going out to Vegas for that. It's called Sporting Life Bar. You can see it at sportinglifebar.com. And we just won Sports Bar of the Year again in Las Vegas. That's great fun.
You've made a great success of your life in America. You're speaking to us from Los Angeles now. I've only got to ask you, you're in LA. Why are you wearing a woolly jumper and why have you got the fire on?
Oh, it's the middle of the night here. No, I don't know. I always put the fire on. It's not too hot out here. I put on the woolly jumper in honor of the old country.
Well, listen, it's a privilege to have you on the show. I'm very excited, as I say, to read the book, New Rock, New Roll. Find out more about the book. Go to www.richardsparks.com. Richard, lovely to speak to you. We'll catch up when the next editions come out. There are 4. So quite a treasure trove there to sink your teeth into. New Rock, New Roll. Nice to have a smile. Well, plenty more where that came from, because Andrew Neil has this week attacked GB News, in Parliament no less. My full response in my take at 10, in 5 minutes' time. You won't want to miss it. This is Mark Dolan Tonight.
That warm feeling inside from Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello, here's your latest weather update from the Met Office for GB News. We hold on to rather unsettled weather across the UK over the next few days, but temperatures will gradually start to climb too. We've got low pressure sitting towards the south of the UK at the moment. That's starting to push weather fronts up from the south, and certainly as we go through this evening into the overnight period, we'll see outbreaks of rain working their way in from the south across many southern and eastern parts of England, some of that rain turning quite heavy, particularly as we go into the early hours of Sunday, and that rain also reaching the southeast of Wales by the early hours too. Towards the north and northwest is a clearer picture, a few showers around here, and turning quite chilly with those clear spells. You can see a touch of frost in places by Sunday morning, temperatures locally below freezing, but holding up the cloud and the rain towards the south and east. That takes us into a pretty wet day across many eastern and southeastern parts of England tomorrow. Some heavy bursts of rain still to come. Notice things brightening up perhaps for a time across the southeast of England, giving some heavy showers, but generally a pretty wet picture, quite windy too, and that rain pushing up into eastern parts of Scotland into the afternoon as well. Whereas out towards the west is a brighter picture, sunshine and showers, but pretty chilly wherever you are, temperatures no better than 12 or 13 degrees. As for Monday, we'll see an east-west split once again, but a reversal of fortunes this time, with the east and south-east seeing the brightest skies. Out towards the west, quite a few showers to come. Those showers merging in places to give some longer spells of rain. And as we head into the coming week, we hold on to a pretty unsettled picture. Outbreaks of rain for most areas at times, but notice those temperatures picking up too into the high teens or low 20s.
Looks like things are heating up. Boxed boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
You really could be our next big winner with an incredible £20,000 in tax-free cash to play with this summer. What would you spend that on? Well, whilst you're thinking about it, listen to some of our previous winners getting that winning phone call from us.
You're the winner of the Great British Giveaway.
I'm slipping neck. Oh dear.
Oh my God, are you joking?
You're joking. Really? Seriously, it's not a wine. What is it?
Oh my God, this is amazing. Thank you.
The next winning call could be answered by you. For a chance to win £20,000 in tax-free cash, text WIN to 63232. Text costs £2 plus one standard network rate message. Or post your name and number to GB05 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 5 p.m. on the 31st of May. Full terms and privacy notice at gbnews.com/win. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
Martin Daubney, weekdays from 3 p.m.
King Charles is well known for his views on climate change, and apparently he's now taking steps to make sure that his Sandringham estate is more eco-friendly. Well, it's been reported that the King is planning to have 2,000 solar panels installed on that estate, and it's set to make the estate largely self-sufficient with a supply of its own green electricity. Well, joining me now is former Royal correspondent, the absolute legend, that is Michael Cole. Michael, twice in 2 days, I feel blessed. Look, King Charles has long been talking up his eco-credentials. Some may uncharitably compare him to Greta Thunberg in a tweed suit. It's one thing, however, to be self-sufficient in energy, but got to be said, solar panel farms, they're hardly eco-friendly, are they? They destroy environments. What's your take?
I certainly agree with that. The King has indeed, as you say, Martin, and good afternoon to you, applied for planning permission. Now, this is going to be a bit of a mini solar farm, 2,000 solar panels on a site of 2 hectares. And as he has the Sandringham estate, 20,000 acres, 4 acres isn't going to be very much, and it's nowhere near where he lives at Sandringham House. Now, these things, which we're seeing on the screen, are hugely controversial up here. A monster one is being planned on the borders between Suffolk and Cambridge, and the people there really despise it. As they say quite rightly, is this grade A agricultural land being turned over to this semi-industrial use and spoiling the look of the countryside and changing it in a negative way.
It's 10 o'clock on television, on radio and online. In the United Kingdom and across the world, this is Mark Dolan Tonight. Andrew Neil has attacked GB News, saying that we are the home of conspiracy theorists and nutters. I'll be dealing with Andrew Neil in no uncertain terms. In just 2 minutes' time, you won't want to miss it. A shock royal development as Prince Harry delivers a fresh snub to King Charles. Find out why shortly. And were ITV wrong to let Rageh Omar present News at 10 when he was clearly unwell? Let me tell you, I'm in rude health tonight. We've got Sunday's papers coming in thick and fast, a packed show, plus my top pundits. Amazing pedigree this evening. But first, the news headlines and Ray Addison.
Thanks, Mark. 10 o'clock, our top stories tonight. Conservative MP Dr Dan Poulter has defected to Labour, saying the Tories are now a nationalist party of the right. Announcing his decision in the Observer newspaper, the former health minister said it is abundantly clear that the Labour Party alone has the will and the trust to restore and reform the NHS. He's urging Rishi Sunak to call a general election as soon as possible. Tory party spokesperson described the news as disappointing, but Labour's leader Sir Keir Starmer says it's fantastic. Dr Poulter, who represents Central Suffolk and North Ipswich, will take the Labour whip until the next election. Well, the Prime Minister says that a recent influx of migrants into Ireland shows the deterrent effect of his Rwanda plan is working. The comment comes after Deputy Irish Premier Michael Martin said the UK's asylum policy is driving migrants from Northern Ireland into the Republic. The government wants to send asylum seekers on a one-way flight to the East African nation. Rishi Sunak says the scheme is having an impact, quote, because people are worried about coming here. 2 men were arrested at a pro-Palestine protest in London earlier. Police say one of them was holding a placard with a swastika and the other made a racist remark towards counter-protesters. The event, which was organised by the Palestine Solidarity Campaign, was calling for an immediate ceasefire in Gaza. Now, part of the march route took it past a fixed pro-Israeli demonstration on Pall Mall. Earlier, a counter-demo organised by the Campaign Against Anti-Semitism was cancelled, with organisers saying that the safety of Jews was at risk. Humza Yousaf is asking leaders of rival parties to find common ground with the SNP as his leadership hangs in the balance. He's inviting them to talks at his official residence to see how they can work with his minority government. The Scottish First Minister says he won't resign ahead of a crunch vote on his leadership this coming week. Comes after the collapse of the SNP's power-sharing deal with the Greens last Thursday. And finally, a gold pocket watch recovered from the body of the richest man on the Titanic has now been sold at auction for a record-breaking £1,175,000. Now, it had been expected to fetch only around 150k. The previous highest amount paid for a Titanic artefact was 1.1 million for a violin, which was played as the ship sank. Businessman John Jacob Astor was 47 when he went down with the ship in 1912. First, he saw his wife Madeline onto a lifeboat safely, but then rather than attempt to get on one himself, he was last seen smoking a cigarette and chatting with a fellow passenger. Well, for the latest stories, sign up to GB News Alerts by scanning the QR code. It's on your screen right now, or go to gbnews.com/alerts. Back now to Mark.
Thanks, Ray. There you go. Puts his wife on a lifeboat, smokes a cigarette as Titanic sinks. That's when men were men. Welcome to Mark Dolan tonight. A shock royal development as Prince Harry delivers a fresh snub to our king. Find out why shortly. And were ITV wrong to let Rageh Omar present News at 10 when he was clearly unwell? More on that scandal shortly. Plus my top pundits, Precious Muir, Christopher Biggins and Claire Pearsall. They'll be reacting to Sunday's front pages in what is going to be a packed hour. Those papers are coming, but first, my take at 10. Former GB News star Andrew Neil has been talking about GB News in Parliament this week in unflattering terms. Now, let's start with the positives. Andrew Neil is an extraordinary broadcaster and journalist, a man whose skills of interrogation are so surgical, so authoritative and so ruthless that in the run-up to the last election, Boris Johnson failed to grant this titan of broadcasting an interview. He knew that Andrew Neil would dismantle him bit by bit, as he has done with politicians of all political colours. Following his departure from this channel, after just 9 days on air, I had a bit of fun about it in my take at 10, which ultimately went viral and was seen by over 1 million people. Here is a short clip. Now, I'll be honest, the relationship didn't start brilliantly, with Andrew pointing out in an email that he'd been flown to the GB News launch from his homes in Monaco and the south of France in the world's smallest private jet. The world's smallest private jet. How could they? How could they indeed? Now, sadly, Andrew has spent much of his time berating this channel since his departure. He clearly needs to demonstrate that he made the right move by leaving. How unfortunate that we have grown since then to be one of the most prolific and talked about media platforms in the country. Privately, it must be a great source of irritation to him that we're still here with a growing and loyal audience. Addressing a House of Commons Select Committee in Parliament this week, he made a fantastic point about how government should stay out of journalism. Too right, but he was damning in his comments about this place.
What I didn't want it to become, I could see it was happening, which is why I left almost immediately, was an outlet for bizarre conspiracy theories or anti-vaxxers or basically the nutty end of politics.
Now, I don't agree with all of the views of all of my colleagues here at GB News, and some of them talk some outlandish bollocks. It's a broad church, as is our audience, demonstrated by an interesting new poll suggesting that GB News viewers and listeners would now rather have a Labour government than a Conservative one. So much for this place being a right-wing echo chamber. But most egregiously, Andrew Neil claims that GB News is a platform for conspiracy theorists. I beg to differ. I would argue that many of our media rivals indulge in conspiracy theories every day. The conspiracy theory that men are women, or that women are men, that you can magically change your sex. Sounds pretty out there to me. The conspiracy theory that Britain has a shameful past and that we should apologise for our history, even though we gave the world representative democracy, the modern market economy, the Commonwealth, and we ended slavery. What about the conspiracy that a pathetic surgical mask, only used in hospitals to stop surgeons dribbling onto the patient, is somehow going to stop a tiny virus which is several hundred times smaller than a single hole in one of those wretched face nappies? What about the conspiracy theory that everyone needed to be vaccinated, including the entire healthy population, notwithstanding the fact that many faced no mortal threat from the virus and were likely protected from prior infection? The government vaccine agency, the JCVI, ruled against vaccinating children, but the government ignored them and pressed ahead. So, are the JCVI anti-vaxxers as well, Mr. Neil? It was Andrew Neil, don't forget, who was responsible for this very chilling headline in the Mail newspaper during the pandemic. He wrote, "It's time to punish Britain's 5 million vaccine refuseniks. They put us all at risk of more restrictions. So why shouldn't we curb some of their freedoms?" I do hope that Mr. Neil hadn't fallen for the conspiracy theory that the COVID-19 vaccine prevented transmission or infection from the virus, because it did not. It goes on, it was a conspiracy theory to suggest that COVID came from a lab, until the FBI director, Christopher Wray, admitted last year that COVID most likely originated in a Chinese government-controlled lab. Now, who knows the truth about any of this stuff? And by the way, dangerous misinformation and wacko theories are deeply wrong and potentially harmful. Ofcom are right to act on any of that nonsense. But labelling everything that you don't agree with a conspiracy theory is illiberal, anti-intellectual, anti-democratic, and in my view, designed to shut down any debate. Quite often, history tells us that a conspiracy theory plus time equals the truth. Now, I'd like to hold out an olive branch to Andrew Neil, because despite what I've said, I consider him to be Britain's greatest journalist, which is why I think he should return to GB News, demonstrating that this channel, like this show, Mark Dolan Tonight, is the home of diverse opinion. The only issue is that we have a packed schedule full of outstanding world-class broadcasting talent. So, if he does return, finding a slot would be difficult. Perhaps we could put him on overnights. How about that? Andrew Neil, keeping you up all night. Your reaction, gbnews.com/your say. Greg and the team put out a text poll. Is GB News made up of conspiracy theorists and nutters? I'll bring you the results of that very shortly. But let's hear from tonight's top pundits, who are all nutters. Broadcaster and TV personality Precious Muir, TV and comedy legend Christopher Biggins, and the brilliant political commentator and former government advisor Claire Pearsall. Biggins, over to you. Does Andrew Neil have a point that this place is made up of lunatics?
Certainly not. I mean, he's just upset and angry at the fact that he didn't succeed on this programme, that no one liked him. I mean, I think it's a ridiculous thing. It's sour grapes, if you ask me, Mark.
Sour grapes. What do you think about this, Claire? I think you might have joined the channel after Andrew left. Well, that wouldn't be difficult. He was here for 9 days. But I maintain, Claire, that he's a fabulous journalist. I'm a huge, huge fan, and I think that these comments are wrong and unfortunate.
He is an exceptionally good journalist, and watching him take people to pieces when he interviews them is quite an art form. But he does come across as sort of the jilted lover almost. He's had his moment, it didn't work, he left, but he keeps popping back and sort of saying, well, I never liked it, and I don't like your friends, and don't like the way you've put the wallpaper up, or whatever it is. And I think he needs to leave that be. There were some valid points in his select committee performance. I did watch it, getting the government to keep out of media, absolutely right. But I think that his criticism of the channel is unfair. He doesn't watch it anymore. And I did actually watch the opening night of GB News, only to be lectured by Mr. Neil for some 15 minutes. And you could see that quite possibly that was not the way to open up a new television channel, and it is far more exciting now and invites on some really diverse opinions, and I think that should be welcomed.
Precious, to be fair to Andrew Neil, the launch here was a little bumpy, to say the least. There were technical problems. It was very stressful. This is one of the most revered journalists in the country, and he had to consider his reputation, which is why he left. It was a shambles at the start. Who could blame him?
Well, I think that he obviously has made his point. I think that as a 74-year-old man, I think he's probably had his peak in his career in regards to, you know, where he goes next. And I think it's nice that he's given the chance and opportunity to young, new talent who is now here at GB News, who now have a voice.
Well, I agree, because he was replaced by a very talented young boy called Nigel Farage, who is thriving and has learned brilliantly on the job. Claire...
can I just disagree Can I disagree for a moment? Because I'm 75, and I'm certainly not giving up.
OK, but...
No, definitely. Well, listen, your best is yet to come, Biggins. And by the way, I think Andrew Neil's best is yet to come. The guy is formidable. And listen, Claire Pearsall, perhaps he's got a point about GB News. We have had our collar felt by Ofcom. OK, we have flirted with controversy. Some of the stuff that's been broadcast on the channel has been divisive. People have taken umbrage with it. You know, GB News is as hated by as many as it is loved. And perhaps Andrew Neil is right to draw attention to that.
But if people didn't like it, then they wouldn't watch it, they wouldn't talk about it, they wouldn't share social media clips. And I think that it's only become richer, we've all become richer because of the controversy. And I think seeing other people's opinions, whether you agree with them or not, does help. And yes, there's been a little light difficulty with Ofcom, but also Ofcom need to be able to act properly and fairly across all channels, and they don't seem to. They seem to really have their knives out for GB News. And people don't like disruptors, but really, they admire them. They don't like to admit
But Claire,
it.
are we not testing the Ofcom rules to the very limits?
Well, what's wrong with that? You have to push the boundaries. You have to see how far you can go. Now, most people understand what the Ofcom boundaries are. And actually, they're quite tricky to navigate. If you listen to anything Ofcom put out, it's very wishy-washy. So it's unsurprising that you're always going to test those boundaries because you're not entirely sure where they are and what they're supposed to be.
And that's what Ofcom's for.
Yeah, I mean, impartiality is one thing. Saying, illegality is another thing. If they want to shut you down because they don't like you, then that is wrong, and it comes under freedom.
When it's personal, when it feels like if it's personal instead of across the board, this also applies to other stations.
Biggins, does GB News sometimes go too far? Have you heard any right royal bullshit on this channel?
Absolutely not. And I think sometimes, perhaps, but I mean, I see a lot of the public. I go on cruises. I meet the public outside of my job. I meet them all the time, and I'm very gregarious. And everybody that I meet loves GB News. They really do. They watch it. They know all about it, and they're thrilled by it.
Briefly, Precious, closing thoughts on this.
I think that we need to be open to new things. And I think somebody, obviously not you, Chris, but other people who are of an older generation are not very open-minded to young voices. And this platform allows that to happen. And that's why I love it. My followers are much younger and they love to watch GB News because it has that diversity.
And they have excellent taste. Let me know what you think. Is GB News populated by nutters and lunatics and conspiracy theorists? Well, that is tonight's poll. The results are in. I shall reveal all next. Plus, a shocking new royal development as Prince Harry delivers a fresh snub to King Charles. Find out why next.
Dubes & Co. Weekdays from 6 p.m.
Organisations, plural, because there's loads of people doing this. The organisations are charging schools to be part of this odd league table about who's trying to outdo who when it comes to who is more trans-inclusive with the kids than the next person. There's something makes me uneasy about this.
Supposing a child comes home and says, you think, oh, I've done well today. He said, well, how have you done? He said, well, I was #1 painter, or I was #1 reader. No, I wasn't. I was made LGBT champion. This is a 4- and 5-year-old. Look, I can understand this, actually, as we develop into the secondary school. I can understand more debates taking place. I cannot understand why we have to thrust it at young children. And I think if you ask the parents, they'd be hostile to it. And what about the role the teacher has to play in all this?
Society has been one way, the pendulum is swinging the other way, and they're pushing it very far in order to kind of proliferate change. And this is probably the toughest period in that evolutionary process, because the LGBTQ+ community is saying that you've got to really rage against the machine to get people to listen. Because put it like this now, even this conversation, the whole country is listening, the whole world is listening. These are the kinds of eyeballs and ears they haven't had before. And there's going to be friction. There's going to be a locking of heads in the process to getting to a point where you establish a new equilibrium where they feel more incorporated. Like I've said, the greatest force of allies that the LGBTQ+ community has always had is heterosexual women. What you're moving towards now is doing things that is beginning to turn them from allies into people who feel that, oh, for you to thrive, I'm being deprived, and that's a problem. When they realise you're alienating allies, they will understand you've got to recalibrate to have that kind of understanding between both parties.
GB News is Britain's election channel. And from Thursday, the 2nd of May,
the people decide.
As the country heads to the polls in a rush of elections, we'll take you through the night as the first results come in.
And we'll pick up at breakfast
with the very best guests and analysis.
And on the weekend, the results won't stop, and neither will we.
We'll explore what it all means for you as we look ahead to the general election.
Continuing coverage live from Thursday, the 2nd of May at midnight on GB News. 2024, a battleground year.
The year the nation decides.
As the parties gear up their campaigns for the next general election.
Who will be left standing when the British people make one of the biggest decisions of their lives?
Who will rise?
And who will fall? Let's find out together. For every moment, the highs, the lows, the twists and turns.
We'll be with you for every step of this journey.
In 2024, GB News is Britain's election channel.
Well, a big reaction to my take at 10. Andrew Neil has attacked GB News. I've responded in no uncertain terms, and so have you. gbnews.com/your say. Gary, who is a GB News member, says Andrew has been establishment for so many years, he probably wasn't ready for differing opinions. Fred has said, how come Mark Dolan can get away with saying things that we can't hear on this message board? Well, let me tell you, Fred, I've made a few headlines in the last few days for absolutely reading out your emails, some of which are pretty spicy. But no one gets cancelled. Not on my watch. I just won't have it. Oh no, the ginger nut cometh upon us, says Margaret. Can I cope? Harsh remarks there about Andrew Neil. I like this from Martin. If only GB News had provided a slightly bigger private jet, all of this could have been avoided. Your emails are always and always will be the highlight of the show. Let's finish on this one. Gwyn, who says, Mark, I've said it before, I'll say it again. I love GB News and I will be gutted if it goes. Gwyn, let me tell you, we are not going anywhere, even if I have to do this show in my bedroom, in my pyjamas. OK, we've got the results of our text poll now, and it is a very simple question. Is Andrew Neil right that GB News is full of conspiracy theorists and nutters? Well, it's a landslide. 75% say no, he is wrong, and just under 25% of you say yes, he is right. It's time now for US News with the Queen of American showbiz, royal and political reporting, Kinsey Schofield. Kinsey, lovely to see you again. We missed you hugely last week. Great news, news that the country needs and all royal fans around the world need to hear. King Charles back at work from Monday.
Isn't it exciting? I can't wait to see him. But can I just give you an idea of the way that this has been covered in the United States? 24 hours before the palace announced that we should look forward to seeing King Charles more often, and 24 hours before we got that beautiful picture of the king and the queen consort, it was the Daily Beast here in the States that originally reported that they were dusting off plans for the king's funeral. That led into a report by TMZ, which led into a report by Page Six. You just see the clickbait that has, generated not only between King Charles, but the Princess of Wales here in the States. And you're seeing some of these outlets that the Daily Beast, which I typically trust, you'd see some of these outlets, I don't jeopardize their credibility just to try to keep up with the demand for royal news. And honestly, it's sad to say, but the demand for really negative headlines.
Most definitely, that's shocking. And we talked earlier in Take It 10 about misinformation, and that's a good example of egregious misinformation, very offensive to the royal family, to Charles and to the country. Speaking of offensive, Harry seems to have put a few noses out of joint with his latest video in his military regalia, wearing his medals. What's the story here, Kinsey?
Yeah, and just really quickly before I head over to Harry, I just want to stress that the king is great, and we are we're so much looking forward to seeing the king. But I just wanted to stress that so nobody thinks that any of those outlets are correct. But Prince Harry is being criticized for wearing several medals while he was presenting the Military Times Soldier of the Year award. Now, this was via Zoom. This is actually at his home where he's at. But it's been suggested that he wore these medals to create an illusion for the American market that he is some type of hero, or the hero that he's actually honoring here at this award show. I should stress that Harry did serve in the UK Armed Forces for 10 years. But there are two different arguments happening here. A, why is he wearing medals? And B, why is he missing the King's Medal that he received at the coronation? Could that be a personal swipe at his dad?
What is your interpretation? An oversight? Is it not traditional to wear the coronation medal? Or does this look like some kind of message?
I think that Prince Harry has been too lazy to take it out of the beautiful box. I think that there is no association whatsoever. He strikes me as somebody that unpacks his luggage 6 months after he gets home.
Yeah, exactly. It's probably in the toiletry bag with his all-in-one shampoo and his shaving foam and his razor. Well, listen, we'll give him the benefit of the doubt. We ought to do that, Kinsey. What about Meghan Markle? How's her business empire growing?
So, Mark, there's a new story coming from the Daily Mail that says she has struggled to find a CEO for American Riviera Orchard. And they said that there are interesting discussions happening between Netflix because she's not been able to secure a person. Somebody from Netflix has said, well, I've got a weird idea. What if we help you manage not only this new television show that we're producing and distributing, but hand in hand, your lifestyle production, the products that could come out associated, whether that is jam or whether it's pots and pans, whatever that may be. Now, the Daily Mail has framed this as failure, but I think that this is a total win for Meghan Markle because Netflix has never done this before. So if this does fail, Meghan gets to point the finger at Netflix and say, this didn't fail because of me, it failed because I put some people in charge that didn't know what they were doing.
Have you tried Meghan's jam?
This is a family show, Mark. No, I haven't. I have not.
You have the mind of a
50,
sewer,
shocker.
Kinsey Schofield. This is another of the brands, one of the products that she's got. And I understand she sent it to a celebrity.
Well, she has sent it to about 50. She allegedly has sent these to 50 different celebrities. And what they're trying to do is allegedly recreate the hype around Beyonce's Ivy Park distribution. Beyonce had this clothing line called Ivy Park, and she sent huge trunks full of free clothes to Reese Witherspoon and Kim Kardashian. And it was Zendaya, and everybody was trying to figure out who was going to get a freebie next. And so they're saying she's trying to recreate that. Now, the last celebrity to get it was Kris Jenner. Friendly reminder, Jenner's daughter, Kim Kardashian, recently criticized for making fun of the Where's Kate drama, which, again, bullying the Princess of Wales. Meghan probably should not be aligning herself with them, but here we are.
Here we are indeed. Great to have you back, Kinsey, and we'll see you in a week's time. The Queen of US showbiz, royal and political reporting, Kinsey Schofield. Check out her website and her podcast, both of which are called To Die For Daily. Next up, Sunday's front pages, plus in a bombshell media story, were ITV wrong to let Rageh Omar present News at 10 when he was clearly unwell? He barely made it through the bulletin. What exactly happened? We'll discuss all of that in the next half hour.
Hello, here's your latest weather update from the Met Office for GB News. We hold on to rather unsettled weather across the UK over the next few days, but temperatures will gradually start to climb too. We've got low pressure sitting towards the south of the UK at the moment. That's starting to push weather fronts up from the south, and certainly as we go through this evening into the overnight period, we'll see outbreaks of rain working their way in from the south across many southern and eastern parts of England, some of that rain turning quite heavy, particularly as we go into the early hours of Sunday, and that rain also reaching the southeast of Wales by the early hours too. Towards the north and northwest is a clearer picture, a few showers around here, and turning quite chilly with those clear spells. Can see a touch of frost in places by Sunday morning, temperatures locally below freezing, but holding up the cloud and the rain towards the south and east. That takes us into a pretty wet day across many eastern and southeastern parts of England tomorrow. Some heavy bursts of rain still to come. Notice things brightening up perhaps for a time across the southeast of England, giving some heavy showers, but generally a pretty wet picture, quite windy too, and that rain pushing up into eastern parts of Scotland into the afternoon as well. Whereas out towards the west, it's a brighter picture, sunshine and showers, but pretty chilly wherever you are, temperatures no better than 12 or 13 degrees. As for Monday, we'll see an east-west split once again, but a reversal of fortunes this time, with the east and southeast seeing the brightest skies. Out towards the west, quite a few showers to come. Those showers merging in places to give some longer spells of rain. And as we head into the coming week, we hold on to a pretty unsettled picture. Outbreaks of rain for most areas at times, but notice those temperatures picking up too into the high teens or low 20s.
We're GB News, and we come from a proud tradition of British journalism.
That's why I'm so excited to be here. It's something so new.
The first news channel to be launched in Britain in over 30 years.
Launched to represent the views of the British people.
To go where other broadcasters refuse to go.
How did you find out about the story in the first place?
Launched with one aim.
To be the fearless champion of Britain.
It's an absolutely fantastic atmosphere here.
This is GB News.
The People's Channel.
GB News, Britain's news channel.
Are the newspapers getting you down?
My wife didn't divorce me that month.
Struggling to separate the wheat from the chaff?
I know that it's a bit of a circus at the best of times.
Well, don't worry, Headliners has got you covered. We'll take the burden of reading the day's news, and if we get depressed, who cares? It's an occupational hazard, frankly. That's Headliners on GB News from 11 p.m. till midnight, and the following morning, 5 till 6 a.m. on GB News, the comedy channel. Nah, just kidding. Britain's news channel.
I'm Christopher Hope.
And I'm Gloria Di Piero, bringing you
PMQ's live here on GB News.
Whenever Parliament is in session on a Wednesday at midday, we'll bring you live coverage of Prime Minister's questions. We'll be asking our viewers and listeners to submit the questions that they would like to put to the Prime Minister, and we'll put that to our panel of top politicians in our Westminster studio.
That's PMQ's live here on GB News, Britain's election channel.
Oh dear, my pundits are talking about boxer shorts and underwear. We better do the papers. And by the seat of our pants, here is The Observer. Exclusive. Top Tory MP defects to Labour in fury at NHS crisis. Government was warned about dirty blood in the 1970s is the other story. The Sun on Sunday next. Strictly judges shock Shirley, my cancer terror. Strictly come dancing star Shirley Ballas tonight tells of her terrifying cancer scare after checks revealed lumpy tissue in her left breast. The head judge, who is 63, who has had 3 biopsies, said, "I feel very emotional every time the phone rings. I think maybe they are my results." Well, we wish her well, and if she is poorly, then we pray for a speedy recovery. The Sunday Mirror. I don't care about money, just take me seriously, says Hannah Waddingham, who's a top actress from various TV hits, including a popular one on Apple TV. Special investigation. Despicable. Evil smuggling gangs hold migrants in World War II bunkers before deadly boat crossing.
Disgusting.
What a shocker. Smugglers are hiding migrants in former Nazi bunkers before loading them onto dinghies for the perilous voyage across the Channel to the UK. Sunday Telegraph now. UK to deploy hypersonic missile by 2030. Tory rebels on warpath after MP defects to Labour. And Robert Jenrick cap migrants at tens of thousands. Sunday Express. Rishi Sunak exclusive. Stick with me, I've got a plan. And Labour leader's big election promise. Keir Starmer, I will keep the pension triple lock. The Sunday Times. Soviet traitor Anthony Blunt may also have passed secrets to the Nazis. Tory MP defects to Labour on eve of polls. And threat to MPs over cash for blood victims. And last but not least for now, the Mail on Sunday. After officer warns campaigner for being openly Jewish, police are so cowed by the anti-Semitic mob, they even cover up the Holocaust. That's right, an etched boulder at Hyde Park's Holocaust Memorial Garden was hidden by a blue tarpaulin today to protect it from pro-Palestine protesters. That ought to be a moment of national shame. Let's get full pundit reaction now in the company of Precious Muir, Christopher Biggins and Claire Pearsall. Let me start with this shocker in the Mail on Sunday, Precious. This is a very special stone, and it's there to remember the Holocaust and its victims. Holocaust Memorial Garden. It's a beautiful piece to look at. It's very eye-catching. It's substantial, and it's currently covered in blue tarpaulin because of the mob.
Yeah, I mean, it's really sad that it's got to this point. I mean, we are so pro-Palestine right now in the movement that's going wrong. Oh, I can't even get it out. Around the world.
Don't get it out. It's a family show.
Yes.
You did have them out.
But at the end, my God.
Do not adjust your set.
But at
it's
the
very
end
nice.
of the day,
what a set.
But
it's
at the
precious.
end of the day, it's really sad that we are just not thinking about the Jewish community. And the fact that they're doing this sends a message, a wrong message, that we're just willing to cover up history and not, you know, it's sad.
It's appalling.
A sad situation.
You're absolutely right, Precious. It's just disgusting.
Yeah.
And I just can't understand how this is allowed to happen.
I can't understand. Well, I think the answer, Claire, is that the authorities have bowed to the mob. You had Keir Starmer begging the Speaker of the House not to run this amendment on a vote about a ceasefire in Israel or in Gaza, because if Labour MPs didn't back the ceasefire, they could be attacked in the street. The mob are running amok.
I think we've forgotten that there is a law in this country and it needs to be upheld. And I think you take the emotion out of it, and it's the same in the House of Commons. Take the emotion away and you can actually make some proper decisions. And I think the police at the moment are favouring one side over the other, allowing a memorial to be covered up. Can you imagine if it was the cenotaph? Everybody would be up in arms.
Yeah.
This is just as bad.
Yeah.
Nobody should be defacing these kind of memorials, ever. And I think that we already have the laws in place to deal with it. So why do we feel the need to do that? Why not, if you see somebody defacing it, you deal with them? You make them come back, you make them cleaner. There's community payback. There is so much on our side. And I think the police have just become so soft and hand-wringing over this. And the Metropolitan Police Chief has got an awful lot to answer for. But equally, in the House of Commons, they need to behave themselves. I think we need to take the heat out of it, look at these issues properly. Jewish people are feeling as if they are a minority group and they are in fear of their lives, and that cannot be right in this country. It's absolutely appalling.
That's what it is. They're not feeling supported.
Absolutely, and we shouldn't allow it.
Yeah, it doesn't seem like the system is helping them deal with what's going on, and the fact that it's continuously going on, and the police don't seem to be doing much about controlling the circumstances of having equal Palestine and Jewish opinions in anything.
But also, when you consider what the Jewish community have gone through over the years, it is disgusting.
Well, I think
both
sides have suffered.
Yeah,
let's make sure we clarify that.
Yes, you're right.
But what I'm seeing right now is that the Jewish community is not being supported enough.
No, I agree.
And, I do think there is a problem with Islamophobia, and there is an incredible rise in Islamophobic.
Or would you call it anti-Muslim hate, or are you comfortable with the term Islamophobia?
I'm comfortable with Islamophobia.
Yeah.
I don't think.
But I think that implies you can't criticise a religion, whereas clearly anti-Muslim hate is wrong.
We get down to semantics on this, don't we? And I think that we just need to look at groups of people who are being intimidated, who are being threatened, on both sides, as Precious has just said. And the majority of Muslim people in this country just want to live their lives. And when you look at the people who are attending these marches, the pro-Palestinian marches, there are quite a number of them who have no connection to that region whatsoever and are just joining in and don't actually know what it is they're chanting and what placards they're holding. And I find that appalling.
And they don't know the history of it.
Did you see any
a lot of them don't really know the history.
They don't know the history.
And so they're just talking about stuff they really don't know about. And the history of it all is where the Jewish community have been from the beginning. So if you're wanting to know further information, why not embrace the Jewish community and find out why this war is continuing? It's gone on for so long. When is it going to end?
Well, indeed, many have just basically done a 2-minute degree at the University of Instagram, haven't they?
There we go.
To inform themselves about it. Have we reached the point of no return, though? Are the mob in control now? What do you think, Precious?
I think the police are not able to control the circumstances, and it seems they're blaming the lack of police. They're saying that there is not enough police to police these kinds of
Would there ever be enough?
That's what their excuse is. But yet we'll have a football match and there's double the amount of police to people that are attending.
What did you think of the St George's Day revellers?
I did see that.
Who were swiftly apprehended by cops.
That was shocking, because I was thinking, well, why isn't that happening at the pro-Palestine marches and protests?
Which many Jewish people feel threatened by. And, of course, we know that a man tried to cross the road wearing a skull cap, wasn't able to cross the road because he looked overtly Jewish. And now
Very brave of him to do so.
Mind you, why was he there?
Right.
Well, he's entitled to be.
No, he is.
Passing through.
Yeah, but I think there was a little
you think there was
bit
an intent?
Oh, I think so, without any doubt.
All right, but a Jewish person on a pro-Palestine march in Britain should not be a provocation to violence, should it?
No, of course not.
No, but if he's walking against the crowd, it might be an instigating situation where he probably shouldn't put himself in. That's what the police was probably
You think
saying.
it's poking at the hornet's nest?
I absolutely do, because he had actually walked away from the situation and then came back and was being filmed. So I think neither side needs to provoke each other, and nobody should be afraid of crossing.
Well, I
the road.
don't know anyone. I've got to say, I don't see Jewish mobs marching every weekend.
But don't you have? We're having too many marches.
Yeah.
I mean, that's another problem.
You're right. It's a dilemma, isn't it?
You know,
the right to protest is uniquely valuable and important. At the same time, many people think that these are not peace marches at all.
Not at all.
No, and they're not really doing anything. What are they gaining from marching every second of the day? It doesn't make a difference.
Well, what would you do? I mean, would you curtail them? Would you ban them?
I would limit them. I think that it doesn't need to be as much as it is.
Limit is a very good idea. I mean,
I'm not saying free speech and all. That is more. They should have the right to protest, but I don't think as many protests that's going on to cause the conflicts that's going on right now. I think we just need to kind of put a handle on it. That's my opinion.
Oh, well, Rishi Sunak needs to put a handle, doesn't he, Christopher Biggins, on his own party. He's lost another MP who has defected to Labour. It's an Observer exclusive. It is Dr Dan Poulter, the MP for Central Suffolk and North Ipswich. He's also a mental health doctor as well. He's going to cross the floor of the House and he's going to campaign for a Labour government. What does this tell us about the current state of affairs politically?
Well, I tell you what I think. I think they should all go. All politicians. We should start afresh and have a new system going because we're in a terrible state, this country, and all we see is infighting between all the parties. And quite frankly, it's getting on my nerves. And I just don't know what I'm going to do come the election. It's a very, very difficult situation. But nobody is looking to the problems that we have in this country, which are immense.
Including that the country is broke, and yet you've got Keir Starmer promising all sorts of goodies for the electorate.
Where's he going to get that from?
You have to wonder.
A lot of people are politically homeless. They don't know which leader they actually are interested in, right? I think that they don't know which way they're going to vote at this point.
I don't.
So will our next government be don't know?
It might be.
I think don't know would do a great job.
Don't know might do better than
I might
both
join
leaders
them.
put together.
Would you be tempted? I think you've been a Conservative supporter in the past.
Yes.
Christopher. Would you consider Reform UK?
I'm sorry about the silence. I don't think I could. I don't know, but I couldn't. There's
Would you
nothing
see it as a betrayal of the Conservatives?
Yes, I do a bit. And I think that the other problem is that I don't think I could vote for Labour. Because there's, I think there were days when Labour were terrific, and they were wonderful politicians. But it's now become such a game.
I mean, would you look at a smaller party? Would you go Green?
No.
No. Lib Dem?
No.
Because the Lib Dems used to be the option when you were fed up, Claire, with the Tories and Labour. I certainly voted Lib Dem in the past, but I feel that they're much more to the left than they were perhaps in the 90s and 2000s.
Yeah, I think they are. And they haven't been very vocal recently. And you would have thought that given what's going on with the Conservatives and Labour not having a great time either, that the Liberal Democrats would be there front and centre. But they seem to have just faded into the background. Now, if you were wanting to gain seats in local elections and the inevitable general election that we're facing, wouldn't you be putting out there your ideas? This would be the ultimate time to promote what your party is going to do.
Well, yeah, on the Lib Dems, do you think the party of Vince Cable, the party of Paddy Ashdown, is long gone?
Yeah, I do.
Don't you think that's a loss? Because I think that was an attractive proposition.
They had some interesting ideas. If you look back to those sort of halcyon days of when there was a third party, there were some really interesting sort of social liberal policies that came forward, and you understood what it was that they stood for. And then they became a little bit wishy-washy, and then they went into coalition with the Conservatives and lost any credibility that they may have. Now, they propped up my party, and I'll be forever grateful for that. We formed a government. But you look at what They are, and the people that they have in their party, and they cannot understand which way it is they want to go. Do they want to be socially liberal? Do they want to be left of centre? Where is it that they fit? And they just can't make their minds up.
But Paddy Ashdown, at least he had charisma.
Yeah.
There was something about
And he made column inches.
Exactly.
And headlines, which we haven't had from Ed Davey. The only headlines we had from Ed Davey are quite negative ones, but listen, I'm holding out hope that the Lib Dems will at some point be electable again. Of course, they will be a popular option for many at the next general election. Greg, how are we doing for time? I've got time for a quick Shirley Ballas. This is the Sun on Sunday, very briefly. Strictly Judges shock. Briefly, if you can, Biggins. Shirley... Come Dancing star Shirley Ballas, my cancer terror. She's found a lump. She's had biopsies. She doesn't know the diagnosis yet. What a terrible position to be in.
It is a terrible position to be in, and I feel for her. But she's a lovely girl, and she gives so much, and it must be frightening.
Yeah.
Because you know you've got something, and you felt something yourself, and you've been told, and then what is the outcome?
Yeah. Yeah, it really is a shocking thing. But all I can say is she's a massively popular entertainer. And whatever she's going through, we wish her a speedy recovery. Coming up, more of tomorrow's newspaper front pages. And in a bombshell media story, were ITV wrong to let Rageh Omar present News at 10 when he was clearly unwell? He barely made it through the bulletin. What exactly happened? We'll get to the bottom of this growing scandal at ITV next.
Good afternoon, Britain. Weekdays from midday.
I wonder, is this the fundamental distinction we need to make between Islam, which is a private religion people may practice freely amongst themselves, and Islamism? When you try and place those values upon other people, place that way of being, force it on people who don't want it.
Tom, I have been very much clear about this thing that Islam is a religion and people are free to follow that religion in the UK, in a free Western society. So we have no problem with people following their religion as long as it is not being imposed onto the wider society. And when you talk about drawing a distinction between Islam and Islamism, people like me, you and me, we are drawing that distinction. We're trying to maintain that distinction. But if you look at the commentator from the Muslim community, some commentator, they would like to blur this line and they would ask you, what is Islamism? Where does it exist? Sorry, it does exist. We see it. And the teacher, this incident is an epitome of that kind of, ideology being prevalent, in our society.
Khadija, do you worry that these views are typical for some sections of society? Do you think that there's a problem with some Muslim men, that they have perhaps views that we don't consider to be British values?
There are certain readings of religion which are misogynistic, which are discriminatory, which are homophobic. We need to be honest about it. We need to be calling it out whenever we hear these kind of views. It's been a long time that we are letting these kind of ideologies crawling in, spreading tentacles in British society, and we are just ignoring it in the name of respecting people's culture and religion. You are not suppressing the UK.
GB News is Britain's election channel. And from Thursday, the 2nd of May...
The people decide.
As the country heads to the polls in a rush of elections.
We'll take you through the night as the first results come in.
And we'll pick up at breakfast
with the very best guests and analysis.
And on the weekend, the results won't stop, and neither will we.
We'll explore what it all means for you as we look ahead to the general election.
Continuing coverage live from Thursday, the 2nd of May at midnight on GB News.
I'm Patrick Christie's. Every weeknight from 9, I bring you 2 hours of unmissable, explosive debate and headline-grabbing interviews. What impact has that had?
We got death threats and the bomb threat and so on.
Our job is to do what's in the best interest of our country.
You made my argument for me.
My guests and I tackle the issues that really matter, with a sharp take on every story.
I'm hearing it up and down the country. That was a beginning, not an end.
Patrick Christie's tonight from 9 p.m. only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
No, I don't think so.
A mini crisis at ITV and News at 10 in just a second, but one last headline, and it's the star on Sunday, the Daily Star Sunday. Spaceman, there are millions of aliens. Well, I do hope that they can land on planet Earth and run the place to a much better job than we currently are. I think a coalition of the Don't Know Party and the aliens.
I would vote for them.
Join.
I would vote for them.
Back on its feet. Propped up by the last 2 Lib Dems in the House of Commons. Now, TV News presenter Rageh Omar has thanked everyone for their good wishes after he became unwell whilst hosting the ITV News at 10 programme. Concern for Omar spread on social media after he appeared to struggle to read the bulletins whilst presenting ITV's News at 10. He actually said to his fans, "I'd like to thank everyone for their kindness and good wishes, especially all the medical staff, all my wonderful colleagues at ITV News and our viewers who expressed concern. At the time, I was determined to finish presenting the programme. I'm grateful for all of the support I've been given." Now, of course, we don't know any details about Rageh Omar's health condition. What we will say is we wish him a speedy recovery. He clearly wasn't well whilst he was on air. It was his decision to press on with the bulletin. But should that decision have been taken out of his hands, did ITV owe him a duty of care? Let's get the views of Precious Muir, Christopher Biggins and Claire Pearsall. Well, Biggins, I'm sure that you've been on stage and on television when you've been under the weather. The show must go on?
The show must go on, and I'm sure that's what he felt, because I think if he'd started off and then suddenly vanished because he wasn't feeling ill, I think that would have been really bad for him. And I think he probably felt that, you know, because he did definitely want the show to go on. And, you know, it is a problem, and obviously we all wish him well. But when things like that happen, you lose control completely, and there's not a lot you can do. And I don't suppose there's another newsreader in the wings waiting to come in. Yeah. There's nobody, I mean, except for a stagehand or something coming in and reading the news. So he felt obligated, I'm sure.
Whereas I'm lucky, because if there's a problem tonight, Biggins takes over.
Absolutely, and I can't wait for that moment.
And let me tell you, the ratings double. The emails come flooding in.
I'll come in as well. I'll do a little segment.
I'm going to start an online TV channel with Huw Edwards and a couple of other
I was excited because I thought I saw you...
Oh, my God.
I was rather excited because I thought I saw you dribbling earlier.
Yeah, well, that's just my age. Precious Muir, there are people online saying that they spotted that Rageh Omar was quite unwell on Thursday before his bulletin. And there are reports that a nurse called ITV at 10 o'clock saying, look, this guy's got symptoms that I consider to be possible stroke symptoms. Now, we got no evidence that that's what happened to Rageh Omar. But these concerns appear to have gone unheeded by the network.
Well, to be honest, I mean, I witnessed my mum having a stroke, and it was one of the most severe things I've ever seen in my entire life. I don't want to get tearful, but it was pretty intense, and I had to act fast. So seeing somebody on camera really struggling, I think they should have just stepped in and took over and just said, you know what, we just got to have dead air at this precise moment, because his health comes first.
How is your mum?
Mum is fully recovered physically, but she still has a little memory loss and stuff. She may repeat herself, but visually she looks great. So she's as best as she can be after something so horrible, you know?
Yeah, well, our heart goes out to your dear mum, and I hope she's watching tonight, and we wish her well.
She will be. She loves GB News.
Does she? Oh, God bless her. Well, then she's got her faculties as far as I'm concerned. Claire Pearsall, this poor guy, I mean, he's not well, he's on TV. It's a dilemma for ITV, isn't it? He says, look, I'm good to broadcast, but, you know, and I'm going to finish the bulletin.
And what would ITV have to do? You either shut it down and then cause
go to a blackout,
mayhem, go to a blank screen, technical difficulties, or you physically have to go in there and remove somebody. Now, neither of these options are good. And also, we don't know. Perhaps Rageh himself just said, no, let me get through, because I think, as Biggins just said, it's that loss of control.
Exactly.
And I think it must be incredibly frightening. Whatever was happening to him, it must have been frightening. It must have been one of those things that if he had something to concentrate on, maybe that was the one thing that he needed at that time.
But the only thing I agree, sorry to interrupt you, Claire, but the only thing I would say is it's a live programme, and if, God forbid, something worse had happened whilst he was on air, that could have been very distressing for viewers.
Right.
And it's also not an ordinary programme. This is a news bulletin. He's imparting important information. It's not the One Show, is it?
No, it certainly isn't. These, News at 10, one of the premier broadcasts. But I think that we ought to be very, very careful in speculating with that. We don't know what he said beforehand, whether he was feeling unwell beforehand and said that he would carry on. So I think that we all need to maybe take a little step back and wish him well and leave it be.
Well, let's be very clear that Raghe Omar has done nothing wrong. He's proved that he's a trooper by staying on air. Good on you, Raghe. I would have done exactly the same myself. And well done, ITV. I think they did everything they could. They've said we're aware that viewers are concerned about Raghe's well-being. He became unwell whilst doing News at 10 on Friday and is now receiving medical care. He thanks everyone for their well wishes. So I think fair play to ITV and Raghe Omar. I'm back tomorrow at 9. See you then.
That warm feeling inside from Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello, here's your latest weather update from the Met Office for GB News. We hold on to rather unsettled weather across the UK over the next few days, but temperatures will gradually start to climb too. We've got low pressure sitting towards the south of the UK at the moment. That's starting to push weather fronts up from the south, and certainly as we go through this evening into the overnight period, we'll see outbreaks of rain working their way in from the south across many southern and eastern parts of England. Some of that rain turning quite heavy, particularly as we go into the early hours of Sunday, and that rain also reaching the southeast of Wales by the early hours too. Towards the north and northwest is a clearer picture, a few showers around here, and turning quite chilly with those clear spells. We can see a touch of frost in places by Sunday morning, temperatures locally below freezing, but holding up the cloud and the rain towards the south and east. That takes us into a pretty wet day across many eastern and southeastern parts of England tomorrow. Some heavy bursts of rain still to come. Notice things brightening up perhaps for a time across the southeast of England, giving some heavy showers, but generally a pretty wet picture, quite windy too, and that rain pushing up into eastern parts of Scotland into the afternoon as well. Whereas out towards the west, it's a brighter picture, sunshine and showers, but pretty chilly wherever you are, temperatures no better than 12 or 13 degrees. As for Monday, we'll see an east-west split once again, but a reversal of fortunes this time, with the east and south-east seeing the brightest skies. Out towards the west, quite a few showers to come. Those showers merging in places to give some longer spells of rain. And as we head into the coming week, we hold on to a pretty unsettled picture. Outbreaks of rain for most areas at times, but notice those temperatures picking up too into the high teens or low 20s.
Looks like things are heating up. Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
We've blown the budget by giving you the chance to win a totally terrific £20,000 in tax-free cash to make your summer spectacular. You could use that cash to splash out on a holiday, make the garden glam, buy a new car, or just save it for a rainy day. Whatever you'd spend £20,000 on, make sure you don't miss the chance to make it yours. For a chance to win £20,000 in tax-free cash, text WIN to 63232. Text costs £2 plus one standard network rate message. Or post your name and number to GB05 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 5 p.m. on the 31st of May. Full terms and privacy notice at gbnews.com/win. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
Martin Daubney, weekdays from 3 p.m.
But first, to a story that makes me very, very proud. The largest cross of St George in the entire country has been unfurled in my home city of Nottingham. Look at it. Now, we all know how so many people have tried to cancel England's national flag, so this is a great thing to see. 6 days before St George's Day, well, we've been out and about in Nottingham to get the views of the locals.
I think it's really good to see it up there. It's good to see a celebration of England, the country. I think there's a lot of times now we don't celebrate, and it's good to see.
I think it's pretty good, actually. It looks pretty good. Yeah. Nice to support the local saint, so to speak.
I think it's amazing. I do. I think it's absolutely amazing, and it's proud for something in our country.
Oh, yeah, proud to be English, of course.
Absolutely brilliant, yeah.
Does it make you feel proud to be English?
Oh, yeah, definitely.
Get in. Well, let's cross live now to Old Market Square and speak to Natalie Fay, who's the editor of Nottingham Live. Natalie, welcome to the show. Always a pleasure to have you on. I know the Old Market Square, my old stomping ground, that council house. Brian Clough lifted 2 European Cups on that balcony behind us there. That council house, Natalie, normally has flags for pride, for trans awareness, for inclusivity, for Black History Month, for disability. But this, when this flag came out today, the first reaction I had, Natalie, was, is it real? It's behind you. Is it real?
It's 60 foot by 26 foot, which is absolutely huge. This goes up every single year without fail. In fact, this year, it's going up for an even longer period than it was last year. I think it's just great the Nottingham City Council is celebrating everything, because we should celebrate everything. We've got a great diverse city, pride, forests, panthers, whatever it is. And the council house is a great place to display all those things. Everyone sees it, it's iconic.
Good evening. Headliners is coming up next, but first, our news headlines at the top of the hour. Conservative MP Dr Dan Poulter has defected to Labour, saying the Tories are now a nationalist party of the right. Announcing that decision in the Observer newspaper, the former Health Minister said it is abundantly clear that the Labour Party alone has the will and the trust to restore and reform the NHS. He's urging Rishi Sunak to call a general election as soon as possible. Tory party spokesperson described the news as disappointing.